looking forward in future and what the plan is for the next 4 weeks or so, if that's okay. So I'll let you have the floor, and it's over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll start, Angela, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So my name is Jodie. I'm an inspector for the Nottingham team, and I work very closely with Angela. Angela covers City and I cover the rest of Nottingham. However, our team covers Leicester, Lincolnshire as well, so I may be popping around those areas. I don't live in Nottingham, so if I am visiting you, it's probably quite a journey for me because I'm actually in Northamptonshire. So I know that some of the practices that I visited are about an hour, hour and a half away from me. So yeah, just bear that in mind. Yeah, if you want to get the biscuits ready, that was just a joke, so don't worry. So I am new to the team. I started this year, so I haven't been able to meet you all yet. So thank you very much for Stu for organising this because it's really helpful. So just a bit of background about myself, really. I come from a practice manager background, and admittedly, it wasn't within GP. It was as a dentist practice manager, but it was within primary care, and I was within that sector for over 10 years. So I'm well aware of the challenges in regards to the pandemic, also challenges in regards to managing a team, implementing changes, and just the stress really from everything from complaints to access, etc. You know, I've been there. I know how it feels to have an inspection. I've been on that side. I know how it feels to get that call. I know how it feels to have CQC there. So that's always at the forefront of my mind. And my approach is to be as open as I can be. And I'm really keen to build relationships with my practices, really. As you can imagine, it's quite hard at the moment being behind a screen. I'm not able to pop by and say hi to you all, but I'm going to pop my email in the chat. So I'm more than happy if anyone wants to contact me just to say hi and introduce yourself. More than happy for that. If you've got any questions, please feel free to email it. I know I have been in touch with quite a few of you already, but I've got quite a big portfolio, so I've not been able to get through to everybody. My work phone isn't the best, if I'm honest. At the moment, it's not working at all. So emails are always better for me. So yeah, I'll pop that in the chat and then feel free to get in touch with me.
Great. I'm Angela Mabhurukwa. As Jodie says, I cover mostly Nottingham City area, but we do work across the whole area in terms of the inspection activity or monitoring activity that we undertake. I've been with the CQC for a while now. I think it's coming up to 5 years. So in that period, I've had a chance to meet some of you. Some new faces as well that have come along. And as Jodie says, we're very approachable. Any queries, by all means, please feel free to contact us, and I'll also put my contact details in the chat. It's been quite a journey, I think, since I started with the CQC in specifically primary care GP inspections. They've changed a lot over the last 5 years. The way we interact with practices, monitor practices, that's also changed significantly. I wasn't sure if it was a good idea or bad idea that our session is just after a well-being session, but we're hoping that we keep, stress levels to a minimum. Fully appreciate, it's a very tough time out there, and we just needed to share with you some of the things that are happening within the CQC with regards to the current environment. So I guess to start off with, in terms of how we are responding to the acceleration of the booster program for vaccinations. So we've paused all routine inspections. So this would be any on-site activity for acute hospitals, ambulance services, and general practice. So that's been stopped with immediate effect. And that's unless we believe there are serious failings in safety which pose a risk to life or serious harm. So essentially the threshold has to be very high for us to be coming out to inspect now. We've also paused the direct monitoring approach activity. So this was those sort of structured phone calls that we're holding with some practices, just to find out how things are, if you're still meeting the regulations. So again, unless there's any reason whatsoever in terms of risk to hold that call, we might arrange that call as a means of trying to obtain more assurance of what's happening at the practice, or to inform the decision-making process as to whether we need to proceed with an inspection or not. So that's where we are in terms of routine inspections. So at the moment, officially, we've stopped them for the next 3 weeks. They are unlikely to be resuming soon after the 3 weeks, as it is quite a fast-moving, ever-changing environment. We're keen to support providers and the system, so we're likely to have a lot of internal staff as well who will be going out to volunteer, whether it's within those different settings. We might have staff reallocated to assist with, say, the registrations process as well, to ensure that those services that are needed to be up and running to assist with the vaccination program, that they are up and running. We will have staff, again, some of our staff are still registered professionals, so they will be going out again, whether in general practice or elsewhere, to support the program. In terms of the monthly monitoring checks that we carry out sort of in the background, they will still be continuing, because it's more or less a sort of a background activity where our systems just interrogate nationally, the national published systems, to just check for performance data, and update our internal systems. So again, in terms of how we respond to anything that comes from that, that will be on a risk-based system. So we aren't anticipating any sort of volume of activity that's going to come from that. So that's where we are at the moment in terms of inspection activity, or our ongoing monitoring activity. In terms of frequency-based inspections, there currently isn't any plan to return to those. So you might find that some of you were last inspected 5 years ago, or coming into well over 5 years ago. The idea is we monitor providers through the direct monitoring approach. If there are any issues that come up, we have that conversation as to whether, how are you managing those issues. Particularly access is a hot topic, as you're aware. And prior to us pausing these current inspections, the plan was for us to support NHS England and the Department of Health in terms of their plan to support areas and individual practices to improve access. So how we were going to do that was to undertake some inspections that were specifically focused on access. So these were meant to be really short inspections, where you have an inspector who comes on site for no more than an hour, 2 hours max, where they look at specifically the responsive key question. These wouldn't be rated inspections as well. So whilst we would produce a report, we would not rate it. And the idea behind these inspections was to provide a view for not just NHS England, but the public as well, in terms of the challenges that the practices are facing, what they're actually providing, the volume in terms of, say, calls, requests that they're getting, how they're responding to that. And we were very much approaching it from a sort of supportive perspective. It was not in any means meant to be a regulatory approach, if you like, but a chance for us to almost speak on behalf of the sector to say, these are the areas where there are challenges, this is what they're facing, and this is how what actions they're taking to try and help patients trying to access services. So in terms of those access inspections, there was actually a set criteria in terms of how we would select practices for those. We were looking at the A&E attendance data, the national patient survey results, and also internally any inquiries that would receive around access problems, accessing services. So across Nottinghamshire, so far, our systems had actually identified no more than 5 practices that we were looking to carry out these inspections. So it's certainly not something we're looking to at the moment to inspect all practices, but they were just meant to be short, focused inspections that just report on what the picture is. Now, with these inspections, we did have the room to make them unannounced as well. Where appropriate, they could be unannounced, or potentially short notice announcements as in the day before to say, we're coming in tomorrow just for an hour. The only people would need would be possibly just the practice manager. Certainly wouldn't want any GPs, nurses cancelling appointments to accommodate us or to speak to us. And the idea was to just walk in, see what it's like for patients who are walking in, or those who are calling, and also just observing from sort of the reception point of view, what it's like from their end when they're, taking the phone calls and how they're dealing with those requests. So, as I said, this was likely to happen before we paused these inspections. So once we resume inspections, there is a chance that we might resume those as well. I wouldn't be able to say hand on heart. We certainly will be doing that because, as we said, this is a very fast-moving, ever-changing environment. And I think there's certainly the appreciation that if you're going to be allocating resources to the booster program, then that will affect access in terms of having to cancel some appointments to accommodate the vaccination program. So we'll certainly be communicating more about it once we start resuming inspections so that you're aware of what will be happening then. So in a nutshell, that's us in terms of CQC updates, and I'm hoping I haven't added to the stress levels at this point, but we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Is there any questions from anyone at all?
Hopefully not stunned silence.
Okay, Suki coming in. Okay, Suki, do you have a question? Okay, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, just one sec. Yeah, I had a quick question, Angela. Hi.
Hi, Suki.
Just wanted to check around university practices. I assume the CQC have got quite a sensible approach in terms of recognising the need for telephone triage, given that students are away at the moment, should there be a sudden inspection on access, etc. And recognising that whilst they're away, there will be more telephone triage, etc.
Yep, certainly. I think we're very much aware of it, that whilst there seems to be a common mantra around everything must be face to face, so to speak, you're still working to that triage model where in a lot of cases it is necessary to have that telephone triage first before you see someone. So definitely we'll be keeping that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from anybody? Okay, so in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time, as we go into January, obviously with the Christmas period. At that point, will CQC then make a decision with regards going forward for a further period? Why is it only 3 weeks? Why is it not longer? There's been a pause. Is there a reason as to why that is?
Good question. In terms of the reason for 3 weeks, I think the idea was that over the next 3 weeks, the likelihood was that practices would be setting aside everything and concentrating on the booster program specifically. Whether that's a realistic time frame, that would mean that in 3 weeks you'd be in a different space. That remains to be seen. I think there is an acknowledgement that it's unlikely that in 3 weeks we would be resuming activity as normal. I would anticipate that in 3 weeks, or certainly into the new year, we will be giving out more comms as to what the position is. And obviously, I think they'll be, by all means, they'll be listening to yourselves, the CCGs, NHS England, to get a picture of what the situation is on the ground before we move forward. So for now, I would say that would be the position in terms of it's a fast moving environment. We'll just put this for now, but review it at that time.
Okay, in terms of obviously the Winter Access Fund has been there to try and improve access for patients, and now we're looking at telephony and cloud-based products going forward. Why, obviously, if we're going to do a pause now for 3 weeks, is there a suggestion maybe there's a need to delay further to allow to then monitor whether there's been improvements in the access, you know, going into January to February, so to allow practices to put it into place, or PCNs, you know, improvements in access, and then do the monitoring? Or will there be just a, you know, the plans are starting to take shape and January we're going to start looking and reviewing those access, or are you going to allow it to happen and then review after it's been implemented as such?
I think that will certainly be part of what will be considered in the decision to go forward with those, because if we're aware that there's work going on at the practice, particularly changing phones or changing system, as you say, then that goes into the decision making as to whether that's actually the right time to be carrying out that inspection or not. So we would certainly consider that information, and we work closely with, say, CCG as well, and with yourselves, that will help to feed into that information. So as soon as we know that, and if it's safe for specific practices as well, if they're going through a particular period where they're having a bit of an overhaul or whatever, as long as we've got that logged in our system, that goes a long way in terms of deciding the timing of any activities that we take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Have you, so from a CQC perspective, have you had an increase in noise about practices, or has there been a decrease in noise? Does there seem to be a trend as we go to Christmas? Will there be, do you perceive an increase in communications and patients going online and making complaints, or going on to NHS Choices, or using social media? Because practices at the moment are facing a torrent of abuse, really, on social media platforms where there's MPs, councillors getting involved. Obviously, all of this creates noise, and then obviously, no doubt, we'll pick up the ears of CQC and, you know, CCG and the LMC and other people involved in this. So do you feel there will be, is there started to be a trend recently? Will it start to quiet down? I don't know, it's hard to predict what's
very hard to predict. I think we did go through a period where we started to see an increase in inquiries coming through, complaints around access, and that calmed down for a while. And our response is always we look at it on a sort of individual basis, what the complaint is about. We always signpost them back to the practice or via NHS England in terms of investigating the complaint. We use the information just for monitoring purposes. We are likely to then contact the practice if we receive 2-3 in a row that seem to be saying the same thing, then we just check to say, is there an issue? Is there something that we should be aware of? Is there a problem with the phones or staffing or that sort of thing? We certainly have had that experience of periods of time where it's increased and then it's gone quiet again. At the moment, certainly for city, I'd say it's fairly quiet. There will be the odd 1-2 people, fingers crossed, who out of desperation, they will come to us. But we make that effort to try and understand what the issue is. And if we need to check with the practice to make them aware. And we also try to get consent from the complainant to say, would you like us to share, your details? Then they'll contact you directly and try and sort it out with yourselves in terms of what the problem is. I'll let Jodie jump in here. I think she'll have seen the same on her portfolio as well.
Yeah, very similar. I think what I wanted to say was just echoing the fact that keeping that communication open with us is really, really helpful. So if you have got a problem with the phone system, and it is out of action for a couple of hours or a couple of days, just dropping us an email just to say we've had a problem with the phone, we're aware of it, we're solving it. Or we've had an influx on social media, there's a campaign going out, a hatred campaign going out about it, just so that we know that we, if we do get an inquiry, we can say we're aware of that, or we can help try and support the practice. So just keeping those communications open with us is actually really helpful. So if you didn't mind just dropping us an email to say that, I think that is, we're not left in the dark then. Do you see what I mean? So we just know we have a bit of background about what's going on there. So I do feel that's really important.
Great stuff. Would that be your top tip going into the next 4 weeks beyond, possibly for PMs? Keep that line of communication open, make you guys aware, or is there anything else they need to focus on, or anything that you would advise to, consider in that period of time?
I've just got one question, Angela.
Yeah, sure.
I think it would be nice to gauge when we went back to how we were talking about the access inspections. It would be nice to, I don't know if you can do a poll on here, but just to see how people felt with us coming unannounced or announced. I guess for me, coming unannounced, it was if we hadn't got any sort of major concerns, is if you were unannounced, it wouldn't make you worry as much. You would sort of have to have us there on the day, and then to sort of deal with it there and then. So it's that getting rid of that worry about us coming and spending the whole night worrying about us. Or is it wiser to, even if it is just a short announcement period, is that wiser with staff being off, making sure that practice manager's there? So I'd just like to know what the practice manager's sort of opinion is with that, really. So feel free.
Yeah, does anybody want to come in on that? Please, anybody? Would you rather have unannounced, or would you like to have announced?
Yeah, or in the chat, that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
And is the notice, is that because you would like the right staff members to be there? Angela, it's definitely looking like announced.
Yeah, definitely announced. And I fully appreciate, particularly with the restrictions now saying people should work from home. There's a good chance that the person we need to speak to is working from home, and that means waiting for them to come in to practice and things like that. So,
Brilliant.
Great.
I think it's just trying to make sure the practice best serve yourselves when you go in to do that inspection, and vice versa as well. Appreciate sometimes that unannounced will happen due to a safety reason or whatever, possibly. However, best that we can try and let practices prepare really from a safety perspective to make sure the appropriate staff are there to support you during your, when you cross that threshold, really. Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you, Suki, and everybody else.
Great. So definitely top tip to just let us know if something happens that would affect your service or that you'd want us to be aware of.
Yeah.
Beforehand. Another one which I actually learned from working with you, Stu, as well, is around that sort of positive PR. So where if you have a particular problem with the phones at that time, just making patients aware, whether that's on the website, that sort of thing, to say we're aware there's a problem right now, we're looking into it. Sometimes that goes a long way in terms of trying to curb a lot of that noise, particularly when they then take to social media and things like that to complain about the practice. So I think that that's definitely a good tip around just trying to put a positive spin on some of the issues. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any questions from the group at all for Angela or Jodie? I know I keep talking. That's why I got a sore throat. No questions. Okay. Obviously, the email, if you could put your email address in the chat as well, Angela, that'd be fantastic. And hopefully we can try and distribute this video as well as the wellbeing out to practices for those who are unable to attend today. But I just want to say a big thank you as well for attending, and hopefully you feel better soon, Jodie. And thanks for attending, and hope you have a great Christmas.
Thank you very much, and same to you. Hope you have a good Christmas.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.